Hi everyone, welcome to GM Manager's channel. In this video, I would like to show you guys the Queen's Gambit Accepted variation. I thought after doing the Queen's Gambit declined, it would be nice to see the Queen's Gambit Accepted as well and understand both the structures very well from Black's perspective. Again, this is to show all the options that white players can play and how Black can counter that. It's more of a repertoire for the Black players, and also like try to understand how contrasting these lines can be. So Queen's Gambit declined is more solid and more positional. Queen's Gambit Accepted also can lead into positional battles, but slightly more aggressive, definitely more aggressive than Queen's Gambit declined. On the other hand, I generally recommended many of my students the Queen's Gambit Accepted uh, rather than Queen's Gambit declined. Queen's Gambit declined is one of my favorite openings, but also like I also recommend QGA as well. Mainly because it avoids a lot of extra options that white players can play, and white has only a few limited options which can be really threatening for the QGA players. Let's get started with this. So d4, d5, c4, dc4 is the starting point of the Queen's Gambit Accepted variation. Now, there are two ways in which white players can counter this move, which are considered widely considered to be the best tries for white. One is e4, the other one is knight of 3 e3, or sometimes they also start with e3, recovering the pawn on c4, trying to get the pawn as quickly as possible. In this part 1 video, I'll talk about this e4 move and all the other sidelines that white players can employ. And in the part 2, we look at the main line with e3 bishop c4 plan. So here we continue with e4. And at this point, black players can continue with three different options. One is knight f6, which is what I think is the simplest in my opinion. Again, many strong players have also played e5 and knight c6 as well. Well, to understand these things better, so I'll just quickly show what kind of structures arises after playing these moves. If you guys think it's interesting for you, you can definitely try this as well. So knight c6 attacking the d4 pawn, and I think the natural response is to go knight f3. Bishop g4, d5, knight e5. Again, bishop g4, knight g6. I think this is almost like automatically played. All these moves are played, and a structure that arises in many different other openings as well. Well, I think followed by, sometimes black players have also gone out for the attack with knight h4 immediately, or a6, bishop d6, short castle. And a very interesting position. If this position suits you, you can definitely try this from black's perspective. Else, the other idea for black can be after e4. Black can certainly go out for attack with e5 directly, and usually white continues with knight f3, ed4, bishop c4, and here, here knight c6 is one way to go, and bishop b4 is the other interesting idea. Both the lines have generally done quite well for black, but knight c6 line, for example, like I can also show why I am not really showing these kind of lines. I'm not recommending these kind of lines for you guys, because I think for a higher level player, playing these kind of positions are much more easier. But in a level where we are playing, like I would say, like if you're an intermediate level player, or even if you're like anyone between 1800 to 2200, I would say like these kind of structures, like not necessary. You can play something much more concrete, which is easy to understand. And typically, like personally, I don't like playing with pawn structures like this. I mean, I would say it's not necessary. I mean, if it's absolutely necessary, we have to enter this, which is really doing great for black, then we can definitely enter this positions. But if not, if I have to get an equal position playing these kind of structures, well, it's not really, I mean, I personally don't like, and I don't encourage my students also to do this. Well, but many strong players have entered this position from black's perspective and have scored very well as well. So knight c6, I would say, like it's a little bit crazy. It goes a little out of control with the pawn structure, especially like doubling up of the pawns. Not great. Bishop b4, however, keeps a little more control in the game. I think this is more straightforward. And e5, knight d5, knight b3, knight b6, bishop b5, followed by, I think once the position clarifies, something like this happened in one of the games that Jeffrey Young played, and I think black can even, yeah, definitely black can be better at this point because open position and black is left with the bishop pair. I'm sorry, the bishop on c6, and yeah, I think the opening is quite successful for black. So e5 and knight c6, both these options, if it's real, if you guys really think if it was interesting, you can definitely try that as well. But my recommendation is simple: knight f6 at this point, and many white players continue with the natural reaction with knight c3, which is not really considered that great for white. Black comes out for attack immediately with e5, and again d5. I think it's easy to understand after queen d1. King d1, knight g4 is okay. Like, I'll not only recover the pawn back, but also, like, I think black might even gain initiative there. And knight d1 again, after knight e4 followed by knight c6. Well, the e5 pawn can again be a target. As you can see, like, black is developing naturally, and black has no such weaknesses. And e5 pawn looks slightly more extended and can become a target for black pieces here. So e5, knight f3 is the main move in this position, which is again met with e d4, queen d4, queen d4, knight d4, bishop c5, and knight b5, knight a6, bishop f4, c6, knight d6, bishop d6, bishop d6, bishop e6. I would say this is a very important moment for this whole system. In general, I would prefer black in this position. White certainly has the bishop pair, so white is not left without any chances. But there is no way for white to immediately recover the pawn back, which means the game still continues, and black certainly has equal chances. And if we have to choose between having the bishop pair or having an extra pawn, like, I think I personally would choose the extra pawn in this position. Many strong players have played this position from both colors, but overall black has done reasonably well. That makes the white players mainly focus on e5 at this point, which is considered as the main move. And after knight d5, bishop c4, knight b6, here the bishop is under attack, and both the retreats, both bishop d3 as well as bishop b3, both these moves have been tried extensively by white players, which are considered as the main moves. Now bishop b3, knight c6, attacking the d4 pawn, the central pawns, which feels like they are like targets for the black pieces. And white usually defends this with either knight to f3 or knight to e2. Both these moves have been tried. Let's start with knight e2 to begin with. Here black continues his development with bishop f5 followed by e6 followed by queen d7 and long castle. Well, to understand this structure, the basic ideas are, well, white has a lot of space advantage, certainly with the pawn on e5 and d4, white's space advantage is very clear. And black, as long as he's able to maintain the grip on the d5 square, he can create an outpost for his pieces on d5 and exchange a few pieces. I think black should certainly do well in this position. Target is the d4 pawn. At the right time, black prepares for f6 and also an attack on the king side. All these plans black should be looking for. At the same time, white will be looking for an attack on the queen side. So you should expect a lot of pressure building up on the c file, definitely. But the position is more or less balanced. Again, a lot of good games. Many strong players have played this position from both colors. But overall, I would say, like, again, a good battlefield for black players to fight for an advantage. The other line with knight f3 in this position instead of knight e2. In this case, we have bishop g4, again increasing the pressure on the d4 pawn. Yeah, earlier when knight e2 was played, bishop g4 can be simply like, okay, he can kick the bishop away with f3, so it's not a big deal. So knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e3 to defend the d4 pawn. Here there are some draw options that white players have, something like knight g5 followed by bishop and f7. Okay, these are like fun to watch, but okay, let's assume that white players are also playing for a win. So bishop e3, e6, and we'll see some similar plans here. So castle, bishop e7, knight c3, short castle, and in this case h3, bishop h5. Again, in this structure as well, the general idea for black should be creating a grip on the d5 square. Exchanges are again favorable for black side. This position especially resembles a lot like the Karakon in the advanced variation. A lot of similarities in this position with the Karakon. Um, like in the advanced Karakon, we have this, once this knight b4, c6, knight d5 happens, I mean, we can even say that this position belongs to Karakon rather than Queen's Gambit Accepted. But again, a very interesting position for both sides to fight for initiative. So this is where the bishop b3 line ends, and we should focus on bishop d3 next, slightly more aggressive. And after knight c6, bishop e3. Here, knight b4 has been tried, and after bishop e4, this was an idea that was played by Kramnik himself. He chose this with a3 at this point. But many players have generally continued with e into f6 in this position. We'll check that next. So a3, for example, knight d5, bishop f3 followed by bishop d7, so that we can create that, we can maintain the grip on the d5 square. The outpost on d5 should be very clear with bishop c6 next. And my personal view is that okay, if white really knows how to handle these kind of positions, white players can really definitely look forward for an advantage. But otherwise, things can go wrong for white very quickly. Like in this position, this was played between David Navarra and Caruana. I think Caruana went on to win this position from here. Like if you see, like white played so many natural moves, and suddenly like black's position seems slightly more comfortable. Like as I said earlier, exchanges are always welcome for black because that will ease up the pressure on black at the same time. As you can see, because of the pawn on e5, white has more space advantage, and whenever white has more space, black should trade off a couple of minor pieces that should ease up the pressure. And based on that, I think black already got a very comfortable position. So a3, knight d5, and yeah, this is basically nothing much. And e into f6 is the main line, at least. ef6, knight c3, followed by f5, bishop b1, and we see some strange moves here, but nevertheless the position comes back to normal in a few moves. Knight f3, knight into e3, f into e3, bishop d6, and e4. A very interesting moment arises here. Again, this position has been played in top level multiple times. Black players need not be scared of this pawns in the center. They are really threatening, but in reality, like whenever white plays e5, this can only weaken the structure further, because after bishop e7, again, as always, we can create a blockade on the d5 square with the bishop e6, and also like we have the bishop pair that should compensate for the central pawns that are looking quite dangerous. But usually white players should not play e5, and again, black has come out with the pretty much easy equality. But position still remains extremely complex, so I'd say it's dynamically balanced position. So to summarize this e4 line, we have, I mentioned 3 options. Once e4 happens, we have knight c6, e5, knight f6. And in knight f6, again, knight c3 is met with e5, which is very easy for black to play after that. So e5 becomes the critical test for white players, and after knight d5, bishop c4, knight b6, white players can play bishop to b3, followed by knight c6 can be met with both knight to e2 as well as knight f3, and in other cases they can also look for bishop d3 followed by knight e2. I mean bishop e3 first, and again knight b4, bishop e4, f5. So these are the lines that arises after white comes out with e4. And the other line with knight f3, knight f6, and e3 is the main move here, which we will check it in the part 2 video. And the other lines that white players have played is knight c3, a6, And here, sometimes when I play this structure online in a online game, and also like I've seen in many of my students' games, very often white players play this move, a4. It's an automatic move that white players play, but apparently in this position it's not very precise. Here after a4, knight c6, and black doesn't give away the c4 pawn so easily, and white gets into a lot of trouble in this line. So if black players know this details, I think black can get into a very good position without much difficulties. So e4 is the main move, and here again I think there's a series of forcing lines here: b5, e5, knight d5, a4, and e6. Black sacrifices the pawn on b5 so that he can continue with bishop b4 followed by, and here white players have played bishop d2, queen c2, queen d2. All these options have been tried, but nevertheless, no matter what, I think our moves are just the same. And after knight b6, bishop e2, castle followed by bishop b7, and after the exchange, after bishop b7, I think the pin is gone, and black can simply take on b5 next. So white takes it back, followed by c5, and I think pretty much black equalizes without much difficulties, at least. Okay, like with once the c5 move happens, like it opens up the position further, and it should be relatively simple for black to play. And the final line can be after knight f3, knight f6, queen a4. Here again, I found several interesting ideas. c6, this position belongs to the Slav variations. This is a direct transposition to the Slav where white plays queen c2. That can occur with this move order. Yes, bishop f5, and we reach the same position here. And if black players don't want to enter this Slav kind of structure, certainly they have other options with knight c6 and knight d7. I found knight d7 to be the simplest in this position. Queen c4 is met with e6. The point is, black is preparing for c5. a6 b5 is one plan, or else they can simply look for b6 bishop b7 as well. I found several interesting games where black players were able to equalize without much difficulties. One of the games that continued in this position went with knight c3, c5, followed by b6 bishop b7, and rook c8, and it felt like black already equalized pretty much without any difficulties. And another line where white went with bishop g5. This was played between Drev and Inakiev, I guess. Yes, and black went out with c5 once again, followed by a6, dc5, bishop c5, and knight e4. But again, he got b5 and bishop f6, gf6, and black played bishop to e7. And even though we can consider this can be an inconvenience for black, but I believe like, okay, it should be like relatively simpler for black to play, because black has the bishop pair, and that should compensate for this inconvenience that black has in this position. So overall, the dc4 line, I think you guys can compare this with the Queen's Gambit Declined, which we have in the previously posted videos. dc4 is definitely much more aggressive than the Queen's Gambit Declined, and also like it also limits white's option to a great extent. Like mainly like Queen's Gambit Declined allows Catalan, and dc4 doesn't allow Catalan. But nevertheless, if you are really worried about the London, which I'll talk about very soon, then again d4, d5, bishop f4 is always there. I don't think there is anything that we can do regarding the London unless you go out with something like c5 stuff. But definitely d4, d5, Queen's Gambit Accepted is if you want to achieve slightly more aggressive position, I think definitely Queen's Gambit Accepted can be a line for you. So I think with this we can finish this video, and I'll catch you all in another video with Queen's Gambit Accepted Part 2, which will basically give us the complete clarity with the Queen's Gambit Accepted. Thank you, and I'll see you all in another video then.